Hi, it's Charlie Angus of the Resistance, and I want to say thank you to everyone from across Canada, every state in the Union, all over the world who've been tuning in, subscribing to this network, because we're all in this together right now in the fight against gangster fascism. Before I get started, I just want to float a trouble. And wouldn't it be amazing if we had an international network of voices speaking up against fascism? That's what we need right now. Like, say, a Midas network, a Midas Canada network, working together across borders all over the globe, talking about how we resist. Well, anyways, I'm not saying anything yet, but I just thought I'd put that out there. Today, I want to talk about the decision by Donald Trump to invite Vladimir Putin to Alaska to talk about bringing an end to the horrific violence in Ukraine. This isn't the first time that Donald Trump has stepped up on the global stage and said that he'll be the deal maker. In fact, didn't he say he was going to end the war in Ukraine on day one?
Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, I will have the disastrous war between Russia and Ukraine settled. It will take me no longer than one day.
But what Donald Trump has done again and again is try and set these stages up so he can look like he's a deal maker with the other big gangster oligarch of the planet, Vladimir Putin. And every single time, Donald Trump ends up looking like Vladimir Putin's patsy, and there's no secret as to why that is. But the reason he's not bringing peace to Ukraine is because he continues to denigrate the Ukrainian people. He doesn't believe in Ukraine as an independent nation because Donald Trump doesn't believe in democracy. Donald Trump will kiss up to Vladimir Putin.
Is now saying it's independent, a large section of Ukraine. I said, how smart is that? And he's going to go in and be a peacekeeper. While
attacking President Zelensky, who has been an incredible leader on the global stage. We saw the horrific way he treated Zelensky in Washington. He continues to insult the Ukrainian resistance while doing everything he can to undermine them, which is causing horrific casualties right now from the failure of the United States to stand up against gangsters. The reason I want to talk about this today, though, is that the decision by Donald Trump to invite Vladimir Putin onto American soil is that he's inviting an indicted war criminal, and we have to keep that issue front and center. Vladimir Putin has been indicted for crimes against humanity, crimes of genocide, over the kidnapping of 19,000 Ukrainian children. I want to just read the indictment and then talk a bit about it. Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, born 7th of October 1952, President of the Russian Federation, is charged with the war crime of unlawful deportation of population children, and that unlawful transfer of population children from occupied areas of Ukraine to the Russian Federation under Articles 82A7 and 82B8 of the Statute of Rome. The reason the kidnapping of children is considered such a heinous international crime is because it meets the test of genocide, because it's about destroying the future of a people. So what is it about Donald Trump's obsession and trying to win the praise of Vladimir Putin? Well, let's go back. Could it go back to, say, 2013 and the Miss Universe competition in Moscow? See, at that time, Donald Trump was having a lot of problems. He couldn't get any financing in the United States because of a string of bankruptcies. He had a whole series of dodgy deals with a whole series of dodgy people, including a real estate deal that went south with Muammar Gaddafi, of all people. But the Russians, they had a lot of money, and Russian banks were more than willing to give money to Donald Trump because they saw someone that was like them. You see, Russia at this time had ceased being a fledgling democracy and had gone under the control of the larcenous oligarchs and Vladimir Putin's strongman. So there was a lot of easy money flowing around Moscow in 2013 when they invited Donald Trump to come over, and he was bedazzled. You see, the oligarchs had looted the Russian economy. They had stolen Russian industries. They were buying themselves super yachts, art pieces. They had trophy wives. This was the kind of thing that Donald Trump dreamed of, and they made Donald Trump feel important. But Donald Trump was worshiping them more than anything. In fact, as the Miss Universe competition was coming closer and he was just getting support from the Russian oligarchs, he tweeted, "Do you think Putin will go to the Miss America pageant in Moscow? If so, do you think he will become my new best friend?" Wow, What a way to signal, Donald, to the FSB, the former KGB, and to the Russian leader, who's suspicious of everyone, that you are a total dupe. So what did the result of this, how was it played out? Well, we've seen that since Donald Trump came to power, he's done one thing after another to favor the Russian oligarchs and to favor Putin. In February, Trump opposed the European resolution condemning Moscow's ongoing war against Ukraine. He voted against his NATO allies in this attack on Ukrainian sovereignty, and he was supported only by, what was it, Russia, Belarus, and North Korea. He then attacked Canada's proposal, where we wanted to go after the shadow fleet of oil tankers that were avoiding the sanctions ban. In February, the United States vetoed Canada's proposal to establish a task force to monitor sanction breaches by Russia. Attorney General Pam Bondi disbanded the program aimed at seizing the assets of Russian oligarchs. They actually then shut down FBI and other investigations of cyber attacks against the American people by the Russian state. In fact, Donald Trump jumped up to defend these attacks on the American institutions by blaming the so-called lamestream media. And of course, it all goes back to 2016 and the role that Russia played and Putin played in securing the White House for Donald Trump. Now, there's been a lot of investigations into how the Russians used online disinformation and how they were able to upend online forums and disinformation, a pattern that, of course, was repeated at the Brexit campaign just a few years later. But the Donald Trump 2016 election was where we were shown how easy it is to upend democracy. And one of those key players in that was a guy named Yevgeny Viktorovich Prigozhin. Now, Prigozhin is a very dark figure. Okay, this guy was a street thug. He went to jail for a long time for a vicious assault on a woman on the streets of Moscow in order to steal her earrings. When he got out, he set up a hot dog stand, and that's where he met Putin or the oligarchs, and then he became known as the chef to the oligarchs. Yeah, the hot dog stand maker. But then he did something very, very audacious. He set up something called the Internet Research Agency right around 2014. And their focus was sending disinformation into Europe and the United States. And in the United States, boy, they found a nation of suckers. Because what Prigozhin did was he didn't just send in disinformation and Russian bought propaganda. He got his people to go onto sites and to pick fights. Some would pretend they were pro-Black Lives Matter. Others would be anti-pro-Black Lives Matter. Some would be Christian nationalists. Some would be atheists. Some would be pro-Hillary. Some would be pro-Bernie. But it was all about turning the online forums into dysfunctional rage machines. And then, of course, the right jumped in, and now you can't even have a public conversation on X or Facebook without the bots taking over. Prigozhin was one of the guys who drove that, and that was driven to help Trump get elected. Now, Trump has done everything he can to try and shut down the obvious connections. He's gone after people in the FBI who investigated it. He wants former President Obama charged with treason. Treason. A former president for having the nerve to actually investigate whether or not America's democracy was undermined by a foreign power. Now, Prigozhin became the head of the Wagner Group, and the Wagner Group were a gang of vicious mercenaries known for horrific crimes against civilians in Africa. That made the perfect gang for Vladimir Putin to send him into Ukraine, where Wagner was involved in horrific violence, horrific killings, massive allegations of crimes against civilians and against prisoners of war. Prigozhin then, well, you know, he got into a fight with Putin, said he was going to bring the mercenary army up to Moscow, and then lo and behold, his plane crashed mysteriously and Prigozhin was out of the picture. But the war crimes remained. I say all this because we need to know what we're dealing with in Donald Trump. We're dealing with a man who doesn't believe that Ukraine has a right to exist. And he doesn't believe that Canada has a right to exist. He has defended Putin's attacks on an independent nation as being a sign of savvy genius, as he claims that Canada's border can be arbitrarily rewritten. And I say this because it falls to Canada to speak up, because the Americans see us in the same light that they see Ukraine. In fact, Howard Lutnick, when he was ranting that Canadians weren't being grateful for the abuse of our nation and the attacks on our economy, said that we had to stop acting like Ukraine. That's how the Americans see us. So yes, we are acting like Ukraine. Ukraine is defending their territory, but it's getting harder and harder because the ongoing interference by Donald Trump on behalf of Vladimir Putin. And Donald Trump has the same belief that Canada doesn't have a right to exist. So Putin is coming to Alaska. He should be arrested as an international war criminal, but that's not going to happen. But then what does need to happen is that the world has to speak up, calling out Donald Trump for coddling up to this war criminal and demanding that the children be returned. These 19,000 children must be returned to their families. These are horrific crimes against humanity. We have to call it out. We have to call out Vladimir Putin. We have to stand with Ukraine. And Canadians know that if Ukraine falls, we could be next. So right now, let's focus on this gong show meeting that's going to happen in Alaska. We know the Europeans are saying that Ukraine and Zelensky have to be at the table. We support that position, but we also have to put the issue of the crimes against the children front and center. I'm Charlie Angus.